The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from Daniel chapter 3. Once upon a time, there was a king whose name was Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar made a golden statue 30 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Then King Nebuchadnezzar demanded that all the leaders in his government should fall down to the ground and worship this statue every time they heard the musicians play a certain sound. The new rule went on, saying, "Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into a fiery furnace." Since very few people wanted to be burned in a blazing furnace, they all obeyed the king's new rule. Well, everyone that is, except for the people who were Jewish. The story happens long after the Hebrew people were exiled from Jerusalem, and while some returned to rebuild the temple there, others stayed in Babylon and made a home. And 3 of these people who decided to stay became leaders in the king of Babylon's government. Their names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They, of course, had rivals in the king's court who did not like that they were in power. And these rivals tattled to the king, saying, "There are certain Jews appointed over the affairs of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these men are not paying attention to you, O king. They don't serve your gods, and they don't worship the golden statue." Well, King Nebuchadnezzar was furious and commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. He said to them, "Is it true that you do not serve my gods, and you do not bow down to worship my golden statue with the music plays?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we're not even going to try to defend ourselves against these charges. You're right, we're not bowing down. So look, maybe our God will deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire. Maybe not, but we're not going to be worshiping your golden statue." How'd that go? Well, as with many powerful leaders, when their subjects do not immediately obey, the king was furious. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times more than was usual and ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So the men were thrown in, clothes and all. It was so hot that the guards who tossed them inside were immediately scorched and died. The king watched, but something looked odd to him. He said to his counselors, "Was it not 3 men that we threw into the fire?" They answered the king, "Oh, yes, king." And he replied, "But I see 4 men, unbound, walking in the middle of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the 4th looks like a god." Nebuchadnezzar then said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out!" And so they did. The fire had not touched them. Not a singed hair or piece of clothing. They didn't even smell of smoke. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him. They disobeyed my command and were ready to die rather than serve the worship any god except their own." Thus ends our story of brave faith, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.